live on YouTube.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone who's joining in. Yes, you're in the right place. This is the webinar on growing green bonds for renewable energy in Vietnam. We're waiting for everyone to join. Be patient for just a couple of seconds while the numbers grow of people who are listening in. This webinar is available on Zoom and is also being broadcast live on YouTube. A recording will be available on YouTube after it's over, should you think it's of interest to share with your colleagues. Okay, so I'm going to get going to start things off while we wait for anyone else who's going to join us today. I'm Sean Kidney. I'm the CEO of the Climate Bonds Initiative. We're a global NGO dedicated to mobilizing capital for climate solutions. And let's be very clear, renewable energy in Vietnam is a climate solution. It's also a solution to make energy available to more people, because we have so many people who don't have access to reliable energy, which is critical to being able to live a life that we all think everyone should lead, having the lights on at night and so on. And also, it helps drive the productivity of the Vietnamese economy, which is important for its future development and wealth for all over time. So let's be clear, there are many, many critical and important benefits, but the one that gets me up in the morning is the extent to which we can switch the Vietnamese economy from being a high fossil fuel economy to being a low carbon economy. And one of the amazing things about Vietnam over the last 3 years has been the extraordinary growth in renewable energy and solar energy in particular, thanks to people like our friends at EVN that we'll hear about in the future. We've seen a massive, way higher than expected growth of solar energy. And this is only going to increase because the cost of the kit for solar energy is reducing at an amazing rate. Every year it gets cheaper, and that looks like it's going to continue for the next 10 years. It's really like a Moore's law of Intel chips here. Now, the only question is how cheap it's going to get. And it's always a challenge. Of course, the solar panels are not, by any stretch of the imagination, the most important cost when it comes to deploying solar. There's a cost of rollout, delivery, connection to the grid. The other costs involved are actually bigger than the cost nowadays of the solar panels. But there's another cost that is absolutely critical to making these changes, and that's the cost of capital. I remember when I first started working in India on solar energy some 6 or 7 years ago. At that point, 2/3 the lifetime cost of a solar plant was the cost of capital. Whoa. And I remember my friends at Solaire Direct, the French solar company, used to say they would win auctions because they could better structure the cost of capital to get their overall cost down. This is still a critically important issue everywhere around the world where energy is being rolled out. It will be important. It is important in Vietnam. What we're looking at today is whether we can find ways to reduce the cost of capital in Vietnam for solar and renewable energy through mechanisms such as foreign exchange currency hedging and guarantees provided. So on this call today, we have Dao Le Hui, who's the Deputy General Director of EVN Finance, which is a significant and substantial renewable energy financier, solar energy financier in Vietnam. We'll hear more in a minute about his story, but thank you for joining us. We're also going to hear from Jérôme Pirou, who is the Deputy Head Structuring and Sales at TCX Fund, which is a targeted hedging fund created initially by the Dutch Government Development Bank, and now with stakeholder funds from many governments. It's a public sector, OECD country, public sector supported fund, put it that way, specifically to try and support hedging where the commercial markets are not adequately providing solutions. We'll hear more from Jerome in a minute about what he's doing and what the interest is in the Vietnamese circumstance. And then Jonathan Neo, who is the business development manager at Guaranco, which is again a government-funded guarantee facility, funded in this case initially by the UK government, designed to be able to provide credit enhancement support for people who are seeking to raise money on international markets and various markets. Jonathan will tell us a bit more about that in a minute. Two critically important services to be able to reduce the financing cost for renewable energy. And that's in the context, we've got to reduce our global emissions, according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, by 55% by 2030. The biggest source of emissions that we can address is the energy sector. We need to ensure there is no future for the coal plants that operate in Vietnam now, and certainly no future for any new ones. And that requires renewable energy, and that applies to gas plants as well. Fossil fuels have to stop, ideally tomorrow morning. But unfortunately, we also do need to keep the lights on, to keep industry turning, to keep jobs going. And that requires a staged transition. But boy, the way solar is going in Vietnam, I'm excited, I'm thrilled, and I'm optimistic that the Vietnamese circumstance will change very, very quickly. But look, let's hear more. First, can I call on Mr. Le, where you've been working in this area for some time? Can you tell us a little bit about your story and what you see as the challenges for financing renewable energy in Vietnam? And just before you start, for all our listeners, if you haven't found the interpretation button yet, you can click at the bottom of your screen on interpretation and choose English or Vietnamese, depending on which language you want to listen to. There is also a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. You can click on that, type in questions, and we will seek to answer them during the webinar. This webinar will be recorded. You'll be able to visit it afterwards on the Climate Bonds website or on our YouTube channel, Climate Bonds Initiative. Wait, go ahead, tell us about your story.
Xin cảm ơn anh Son rất nhiều. Xin chào tất cả các anh chị. Trước tiên tôi xin trân trọng giới thiệu tôi là Phó Tổng Giám đốc của Công ty Tài chính Cổ phần Điện lực ở Việt Nam. Việt Nam như các anh chị đã biết là một đất nước rất là tươi đẹp, nhưng là một đất nước đang phát triển, và chúng tôi trước đây thì là cái năng lượng hoàn toàn phụ thuộc từ thủy điện và nhiệt điện. Chính phủ Việt Nam đã có các cái chính sách khuyến khích để phát triển năng lượng tái tạo từ cách đây một vài năm. Tuy nhiên do những cái lý do nhất định, ví dụ như là giá thành của cái năng lượng tái tạo ở những cái thời điểm đó còn cao, thành ra chỉ khoảng tôi nghĩ là khoảng 2 năm gần đây thì cái việc phát triển năng lượng tái tạo mới có những bước đột phá.
Wait, can I get you to hold on for a minute? We've got a problem with the translation. I'm sorry about that. Okay. Can we just get the translation working first? Because unfortunately, we can't follow what you're saying.
Anh có thể đọc lại không nhỉ?
Just one moment. Leticia, tell me when you've got it sorted. I'm sorry, everyone listening to this. There's a technical problem with the translation. I think it's to do with bandwidth. We're just trying to sort it. I want to hear what we're saying. So, and unfortunately, my Vietnamese is not very good.
Sean, I'm afraid our interpreter's internet has fallen, so she's not in the call anymore. Just a second.
Mooney, are you game to fill in the meantime until she's back online?
Yeah, sure. So, okay. Mr. Huy, could you please restart?
Xin chào anh Son, xin chào tất cả các anh chị. Tôi rất là hôm nay tôi rất hân hạnh và trân trọng gửi lời chào đến các anh chị và cảm ơn sự cái buổi tổ chức về trái phiếu xanh ngày hôm nay.
One
tôi
moment,
xin
wait. Let's just get her up. That was great, thank you. Let's just check that Mooney can make it work.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sean. And thank you so much, everyone. And good afternoon and good morning there.
Mooney, I have added you as an interpreter.
Okay.
So now we need to change to the English channel, I think.
Okay, Mooney, can you try again? Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, wait, go ahead.
Như các bạn biết đấy, Việt Nam chúng tôi là một nước đang phát triển và
as you may see, I don't see. I'm sorry, but I don't see my interpretation tab. Can you please set up?
và trước đây
Mooney's handling your interpretation while you've been out. Letitia, over to you to organize, please. This is very unfortunate. You know, I've run about 400 webinars since COVID began, and this is the first time this has happened, that we've had a breakdown of the translation. My apologies, everyone. Give us patience until we get it right. Maybe we will wait for a minute until the interpretation. We might ask Jerome to introduce TCX first, and we'll come back to you because unfortunately it's going to take a few minutes to sort out the interpretation. So give us 5 minutes. We'll do introductions from Jerome and Jonathan, and then we'll come back to your story.
Okay.
Wait, is that okay? Please.
Absolutely.
Jerome, go ahead.
Yeah. And should I pause for Mooney to translate? It's not necessary. Meanwhile.
No, Jerome, because interpreters come back, so you can please talk.
No, that's okay. And I'm happy to repeat myself. It's not a problem. So TCX is a fund which serves one purpose, is to support the growth of megawatts and gigawatts in Vietnam, financing local currency. So Sean, I think you rightly pointed that financing is an important point when it comes to the exponential growth of energy assets in Vietnam. And it's shocking to see that the pace at which Vietnam has outpaced Thailand between 2018 and 2019. But to my knowledge, when I read the documentation, is most of these assets, new assets added to the energy park of Vietnam, they are financed in USD. And I see that feed-in tariffs are denominated in USD, and that has been one of the reasons with tax rebate that has boosted the growth of assets in the country. The job of TCX is to contribute to the natural development of the energy park in Vietnam, but with local currency financing. So the way it works is TCX is hedging foreign exchange risk, USD VND risk, for tenors up to 30 years, 30. So to the extent the government and EVN agree to offer feed-in tariff structures or local currency PPAs to developers, we can help those developers to secure VND financing for tenors as long as 20, 30 years. It's not a problem. And the way it works is it's not TCX financing in Vietnamese dong. Is we hedge impact investors, DFIs, shown, can be MDBs, can be impact funds, or it can even be investment and commercial banks with whom we work. So instead of those financiers offering dollar financing, they can offer VND. And you see, this is where it becomes obvious and very interesting is now the government and EVN, they're in a position to support the massive growth and needs of the country in terms of green energy, but this time around in local currency. So they can not only achieve a lower footprint in energy terms, but they can finance the growth of all these assets in their national currency without taking the foreign exchange risk. And when I see the growth and the pace at which Vietnam is adding megawatts and gigawatts to the country, at some point FX risk will become relevant. So right now the Vietnamese dong is strong, but when you finance those assets for 20 years, who knows what FX risk can do to all these plants and assets that have been built over the years. And that's the challenge we want to solve. So we want to contribute to that exponential growth, but we want to make sure that developers can come to us and our network of investors to get financing in Vietnamese dong. Over to you, Sean, Jonathan.
Thanks, Jerome. Jonathan, give us a brief intro before we go back to Hue.
Yeah, thanks, Sean, and thanks, Jerome, for the introduction. I think it's really interesting to set. I think with TCX and Garanco going first, we are talking about solutions, and I think it'd be interesting to hear Mr. Hui about the challenges faced by Vietnam locally. But I think where a bit of introduction of what Garanco does in the context, right? For those who are not familiar with us. I think as the name suggests, Garanco, we are a local currency guarantee provider, and we are funded, as Sean, you pointed out, by 7 of the G12 governments. And as the name suggests, we have one product, which is credit guarantee. But we do that in various forms and structures, and I think that's one of the strengths that we pride ourselves in, to come up with innovative structures to actually enable commercial lenders and or bond investors to finance companies in sustainable infrastructure, and that includes both developers, as we think of renewable projects, but also in the financial institution space as well, who are the institutions who provide those financing on lending to renewable players in the market in Vietnam. And I think in Vietnam, I think as we have pointed out, that there is a financing gap, in terms of long-term, high-quality local currency debt, and I think the same we see in a lot of markets that we operate in. But I think at this stage, it's not only just about the financing, but also about green financing, which I think is the focus of our our webinar today. And I think it's very. I think the timing is also opportune, given that it's COP26 this week, just starting this week, and also that the in Vietnam's context, as Jerome has pointed out, that there has been a very strong growth in this demand for renewable energy within the country, right? With the power development plans increasing the ratios of energy mix within Vietnam, and we only see that is going in this direction with all trends pointing in the green direction. And I think our work in Vietnam is therefore in this regard, right, to support, is very anchored in this regard, with providing the sort of long-term financing, local currency financing, supporting that to support green development. And I think it's an evolution of what we've done in Vietnam over the last couple of years. We've executed 2 transactions, and we have a few more, all of which are very much geared towards the green financing, and working with partners like the CBI, like EVN Finance, and a range of other partners. So it's really nice to also see that familiar faces today and actually talk about this topic today. And I think just to give a bit of flavor about what how the guarantee products benefit all parties in transactions that we worked on. I think the way to look at it would be for the issuers and borrowers, what the credit guarantee provides. It's the enabling of the certainty of longer financing, because our guarantee, off the back of our guarantee, and the banks or the institutional investors, like insurance funds, get more comfortable with providing that financing to the companies to actually finance that development of infrastructure, and the fact that it in turns improve their funding resilience, raise the international profile and give them access to a new class of investors like insurance and debt funds. I think for investors, they are there, we are there to provide, again, through the risk and price discovery process, learn the sort of how such asset class will operate, and over time improve the risk return profile. And I think Guaranco is really there to set, to push the boundaries and set the pathways to show out of the possible, and that is very much in the heart of what we do. And I think ultimately, if we want to talk about supporting the Vietnamese market to achieve the scale needed to support the green financing development, I think, and ultimately the pricing to come down, right, as you pointed, Sean. I think we are there to push those innovative structures and hopefully to help support the market achieve those scales locally, and also really build the resilience in the market. I'll stop there, and then very happy to talk more about our products and more of the case studies and so on. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jonathan. We'll come back to the details of the Guaranco product. I mean, there is cost involved, but there are benefits, and the same with TCX in a minute. But I think now we might go to speak finally. Hopefully everything's settled down on the translation. Back to you. My apologies for mispronouncing of your name before. I'm learning Vietnamese, as you know. Please, over to you. Tell us your story at EVN. Đào Louis, it's over to you.
Xin cảm ơn anh Son ạ. Như các anh chị biết đấy, thì cái tăng trưởng kinh tế của Việt Nam trong rất nhiều năm gần đây là một trong những đất nước tăng trưởng kinh tế rất là ấn tượng, ở mức cao nhất ở trên khu vực và trên thế giới. Cùng với việc cái tăng trưởng kinh tế thì cái việc nhu cầu về năng lượng là tất yếu. Tuy nhiên cái năng lượng, tất cả các nguồn năng lượng như thủy điện hay nhiệt điện thì sẽ là không ở trong cái chính sách khuyến khích của chính phủ. Trong những năm tới thì chính phủ Việt Nam khuyến khích là sẽ phải phát triển năng lượng tái tạo để đáp ứng các cái thỏa thuận với các cái cam kết quốc tế của Việt Nam. Chúng tôi có thể tự hào nói rằng ở Việt Nam cái nguồn năng lượng điện gió, chúng tôi có một cái bờ biển rất là dài, là một đất nước ở gần cái khu vực xích đạo, thành ra là chúng tôi là có một cái tài nguyên vô tận về năng lượng, từ năng lượng mặt trời cũng như từ năng lượng điện gió ở trong đất liền cũng như ngoài khơi. Đây là một cái nguồn thiên nhiên rất là vô tận, và đấy là cái lợi thế của đất nước Việt Nam chúng tôi. Về cái nền chính trị ở Việt Nam thì chúng tôi có thể tự tin nói rằng ở Việt Nam có một cái nền chính trị tương đối ổn định, rất ổn định. Người Việt Nam thì rất là hiền hòa, cũng như ngoài ra về cái chính sách tiền tệ của Việt Nam trong những năm gần đây thì như các anh đã biết là cái tỷ giá hối đoái, tỷ giá giữa đô đồng trong những năm gần đây rất ổn định, trong khoảng 1-20 năm gần đây rất ổn định, cũng như là cái mức độ lạm phát, kiểm soát lạm phát ở Việt Nam rất tốt. Đồng thời là cái dự trữ ngoại hối của chính phủ Việt Nam ở một cái mức ở những cái năm cách đây rất là nhiều năm thì mức dự trữ ngoại hối Việt Nam còn mức thấp, như hiện tại như năm 2021 mức dự trữ ngoại hối của Việt Nam đã rất là cao, loanh quanh khoảng 100 tỷ đô la Mỹ. Về cái nhu cầu về phát triển năng lượng xanh, năng lượng tái tạo thì như đã trao đổi với các anh chị ở đây, đấy là nhu cầu tất yếu ở Việt Nam. Và vì cái nhu cầu năng lượng ở Việt Nam là rất lớn, chúng tôi có những cái nguồn ánh sáng mặt trời, có gió, có biển, thành ra đấy là những cái thuận lợi. Tuy nhiên có một cái là chúng tôi rất là cần sự hỗ trợ, đó là những cái nguồn vốn dài hạn. Ở Việt Nam chúng tôi thì những cái nguồn vốn ngắn hạn thì nguồn vốn dài hạn là cái điểm có thể là tôi nghĩ rằng đấy là cái thế mạnh ở các nước, là một cái thế mạnh cần cái sự hỗ trợ từ cái tổ chức quốc tế, từ nước ngoài, và đấy là cái câu chuyện mà chúng ta sẽ thảo luận trong cái buổi thảo luận ngày hôm nay. Về cái như lúc nãy trả lời cái câu hỏi của anh Jerome về cái việc giải ngân bằng Việt Nam đồng hay giải ngân bằng đô la Mỹ, tôi có thể khẳng định rằng giải ngân Việt Nam đồng hay giải ngân bằng đô la Mỹ để hiện tại ở Việt Nam chúng tôi đều đang thực hiện. Trong khoảng vài năm gần đây, EVN Finance đã thực hiện vay được từ rất nhiều tổ chức quỹ quốc tế từ châu Âu theo những cái tiêu chuẩn nghiêm ngặt của châu Âu, theo những cái buổi due diligence, buổi thẩm định từ các nước châu Âu, và chúng tôi đã nhận những cái nguồn vốn dài hạn từ 3 năm, 5 năm bằng những cái nguồn đô với lãi suất LIBOR cộng một cái % nhất định, hoặc là chúng tôi có thể nhận bằng tiền đồng. Tuy nhiên cái việc nhận cái nguồn vốn LIBOR này đối với bản thân ở trong nước thì chúng tôi đã làm những cái nghiệp vụ hedging, thành ra nó cũng không ảnh hưởng trong cái việc là chúng tôi giải ngân cho khách hàng của mình, tại vì cuối cùng sau khi thực hiện nghiệp vụ hedging chúng tôi đã giải ngân hoàn toàn cái số lượng đó cho các khách hàng bằng tiền Việt Nam đồng theo đúng cái chính sách chỉ đạo của nhà nước, của chính phủ Việt Nam. Thành ra cái việc giải ngân bằng đô hay giải ngân bằng đồng tôi nghĩ rằng cũng không phải là vấn đề quan trọng đối với chúng tôi.
So what you're telling me is there's a lot of predictability in the Vietnamese circumstance, which should make the support from the likes of Guaranco or TCX an easier story than it would otherwise be. But just tell me a little bit before we start on that. What are you seeing about the growth of the solar sector and the renewable sector in in Vietnam, as well as the reason I've just come off of the discussion about Indonesia, over the next couple of years? Like, do you see this growth rate continuing to grow, or are there reasons to think that it's going to taper off? What's your reading? I'm optimistic, of course. I hope it'll grow, but in reality, what's really the situation on the ground?
Quan điểm rất cảm ơn anh Son. Quan điểm của tôi thì là nó cũng là một cái quan điểm xuyên suốt khi mà làm việc với các đơn vị ngành điện cũng như các đơn vị khác. Việc tăng trưởng kinh tế thì đồng nghĩa với việc chúng ta sẽ phải việc tăng trưởng GDP. Việt Nam là một trong những nước tăng trưởng, như tôi đã nói, Việt Nam là một trong những nước tăng trưởng GDP mạnh mẽ nhất ở trong khu vực cũng như là trên thế giới, ở mức loanh quanh khoảng 6-7% hàng năm. Vì vậy đồng nghĩa với việc tăng trưởng kinh tế thì cái việc nhu cầu về năng lượng là sẽ phải tăng trưởng là tất yếu. Nó sẽ tương ứng với mức độ khoảng 6-7% hoặc có thể là cao hơn nữa về cái nhu cầu tăng trưởng năng lượng hàng năm để phục vụ cho các khu công nghiệp, phục vụ cho các nhà máy, phục vụ cho các cái cơ sở sản xuất. Nhưng tuy nhiên cái năng lượng của chúng ta thì là năng lượng hóa thạch, như tôi đã trình bày, năng lượng hóa thạch thì chúng tôi sẽ không, các nhà máy sẽ không được sẽ không có cấp phép cho bất kể một cái nhà máy năng lượng hóa thạch nào tiếp tục nữa. Cũng việc thủy điện thì cũng y như vậy. Thành ra chúng tôi chỉ có con đường duy nhất, đó là phải phát triển năng lượng điện gió cũng như năng lượng điện tái tạo, hoặc là xử lý các nhà máy rác thải, điện từ các nhà máy rác thải, hoặc là điện từ sinh khối. Thì đấy là cái việc phát triển năng lượng tái tạo là cái con đường duy nhất ở cái đất nước chúng tôi. Và cái nhu cầu điện năng đối với đất nước chúng tôi là cái điều là cái việc tất nhiên. Và nếu mà theo như đánh giá của các nhà kinh tế thì là nhu cầu năng lượng của chúng tôi trong những năm tới sẽ là rất lớn, và hiện tại là cái cung là không đáp ứng đủ cái nhu cầu về điện. Năm 2021, năm 2020, 2021 theo nhiều dự đoán là có thể là điện là sẽ bị thiếu. Tuy nhiên vì cái dịch Covid-19 đã xảy ra, thành ra nó làm cho cái nền kinh tế chung đã bị ảnh hưởng rất nhiều, và vì vậy cái nhu cầu điện nó không bị, cái việc thiếu đó nó đã không xảy ra. Tuy nhiên nếu mà sắp tới khi mà Covid chúng ta khống chế được cái Covid và cùng sống chung với cái Covid đó, thì tôi chắc chắn rằng những cái năm 2022 và những cái năm sắp tới, cái nhu cầu điện năng sẽ rất lớn và cung của điện năng hiện tại sẽ không đủ, chưa đáp ứng đủ với nhu cầu về điện năng ở đất nước Việt Nam này.
Okay, so quite challenging, the scale, it sounds like, that you're going to have to tackle. Now, my question really is the extent to which, next question is the extent to which international capital is going to be important to continue to fuel this growth. And that will be a segue afterwards for Jonathan and then Jerome to talk about their support for that. So tell me, Huy, from your perspective at EVN in Vietnam, how important is opening up the channels to international capital to be able to keep the engine moving? In Vietnam, how important is opening up the challenges to international capital? Huy, from your perspective inside Vietnam.
Đúng là cái khó nhất ở Việt Nam đó là huy động các cái nguồn vốn dài hạn. Nguồn vốn huy động dài hạn ở Việt Nam nó không phải là, nếu mà nguồn vốn dài hạn ở thị trường Việt Nam thì không phải là thế mạnh, thành ra chúng tôi nghĩ rằng sẽ phải rất là tăng cường cái việc huy động nguồn vốn dài hạn từ nước ngoài, vì tất cả các cái dự án điện gió hay là điện năng lượng mặt trời thì đều là những cái nhu cầu nguồn vốn chung dài hạn từ 4 năm, 5 năm hoặc là có thể cao hơn. Chúng tôi cũng rất là tự hào là trong cái quá trình làm việc với rất nhiều tổ chức quốc tế thời gian vừa qua, chúng tôi đã có những cái kinh nghiệm trong cái việc là cùng với các anh chị tham gia các cái dự án thẩm định về các cái dự án về environment and society, về môi trường và xã hội cho các cái dự án đấy. Thành ra là các cái triển khai cho các cái khoản vay ngày càng ngắn hơn, vì chúng tôi đã có kinh nghiệm và đáp ứng theo các cái chuẩn của các cái tổ chức quốc tế châu Âu hay là của các tổ chức quốc tế châu Âu.
So this is the same challenge facing, of course, every country in ASEAN, and that's the conversation I was having with my Indonesian friends earlier today. Jonathan, can I ask you first, how can you support that ambition? And then we'll see the challenging one of Jerome with currency hedging in terms of tenors here. So, Jonathan, and give us an example, because you've already done a couple of project deals, as you said.
Yeah, no, very, very happy to. I think it's an interesting question you asked. I think around the mobilization of international capital to support, the financing gap in Vietnam, and as well in many other developing countries as well. I think for us, I think that it's an interesting question because it's not only about the access to, say, offshore and onshore capital, but I think it's also unlocking certain class of investors that traditionally, I think we talk about this a lot. That traditionally we don't see them investing at the same rate, even though we talk about them being a natural class of investors, right? And what I'm trying to say here is other institutional fund investors, the insurance funds, the pension funds, because of the nature of both the investors and the nature of infrastructure access, right? Long dated, stable returns, arguably speaking. And I think that's what we're trying to do here at Garanco, right? I think what we're trying to do here is to actually enable that investment to take place, matching the across the sort of currency risks, maturity risks, to enable the investments to go into the infrastructure assets. They're very much needed in countries like Vietnam, and I think without. I'll maybe perhaps talk about, I think in Vietnam, I think today, I think it's interesting because I think we've done two guaranteed transactions in the last couple of years. And I think what we're looking at now is very much in the green space. And I think that's the topic of what we've done, right? We've done affordable housing, which is more of a social angle. But I think now the aspect on green is very much featured in all our transactions, our pipeline transactions right now. And I think we are pushing, again, I said this earlier, partners like CBI, to make sure that all the instruments that we are pushing for are actually certified green, right? That is actually a third-party assurance process as well. I think that gives And it's important to highlight that because I think it gives the investors the reassurance as well, because there are concerns around greenwashing these days, right? That you label any asset as green. And I think that is also an important aspect we're trying to do in Vietnam. So I think coming back to that, I think for Vietnam, green is very new. I think I would say, as far as I understand, there has not been today an onshore corporate green bond issuance to date. I know there were pilot schemes done earlier with, I think, sub-sovereign entities at the provisional levels. I think that is very much what we're trying to do. And I think I can give an example of what we've done in another jurisdiction in other countries, and that is very consistent across Guaranco's agenda in all markets. And I think what we're trying to do in Vietnam. So I think what we, a success story that I think we like to just mention is a transaction we've done in Kenya with a real estate developer called Acorn. And I think we supported them on a green bond issuance to support the development of student accommodation in the country. But the student accommodation is then built to a number of efficiency standards and green standards to make sure, and then it was then subsequently certified by CBI for the bond issuance. And I think what we were able to achieve, I think green is that layer on top that is in itself, it's an enabler of a number of fundamentals in the view, right? And I think the way we look at it, that the bond turned out, the bond eventually was the first green bond in East Africa, it's the first project bond in East Africa as well. On that basis. And I think what we are able to do is to actually provide a 50% credit guarantee, which allowed the company to also leverage up the credit rating of the bond issuance. So we only provided 50% of the bond issuance facility, and that actually got the bond credit rating to be improved to the B1 rated by Moody's, which was actually one notch above Kenya's sovereign B2 rating at that point in time. So actually, that is through the work of one example of what we're trying to do through our work at Guaranco, right? To actually provide the credit enhancement support at a 50% guarantee and leverage it up and actually allow it to actually build on enable that financing to take place. I think one thing to mention as well, I think because of all the effort that's gone in just to structuring the green aspect of the focus, there was a huge investor interest, and eventually we actually the bond issuance were actually dual listed both on the Nairobi Stock Securities Exchange locally and the London Stock Exchange, and that is the part where you talked about enabling new class of investors, but also international and domestic capital as well. So I think that is I just want to bring that up because I think that was a very neat story to talk about all the different aspects that come together. And also how green is actually an enabler across all of those aspects as well. So I'll stop here.
That's great. The Acorn bond from Kenya was a great success. It was listed on the London Stock Exchange. And we hope that we're going to get some bonds from EVN issued in the London or Singapore or the Hong Kong Stock Exchange along these lines. But what's your appetite for tenor of guarantees? I mean, do you have a sort of limit? The Acorn one was a 5-year tenor, that particular bond. If we're looking at getting longer tenor bonds into place, will Guaranco help with that?
Yeah, so I think by what we typically do is up to 15 years. We can even go longer.
15 years.
15, 1-5. So I think for us, it's not a big concern. Not that it's not a big concern. I think that is not the main limitation. I'll put it that way in terms of the guarantee of the tenor of the guarantee. I think it's a lot about the partners that we work with, because ultimately we enable the commercial investors to come in and take up, whether that's a bond or a loan. And I think it's a lot on the investor side, what are they comfortable with? And there's a journey there, right? We start at 5 and then we start to push the boundaries to 7, 10. Eventually we try to get to 15 if it's something that, for the nature of the asset, it makes sense for them. But I think, yeah, that is the answer from our side.
Okay, then a 15-year Guaranco guaranteed bond from EVN listed on multiple stock exchange. That's what we want. Yes.
Yes.
Let me go. But however, let me go to Jerome, because of course there are more complications than that. Jerome, tell us your response, what you've just heard in terms of the nature of the opportunity for TCX to work with Vietnamese partners And how would it actually work?
Yeah, the way I see it, Sean, is I'm thinking from the developer perspective. So they look at the capital structure. So, usually a developer is looking at the bankability of a PPA, and will put some equity, that's their skin in the game, Sean, and then they will leverage the capital structure. So they may turn to Jonathan so they can secure a bond, whether it's listed domestically or offshore on the London Stock Exchange. But the reality is a lot of the debt financing that the developer would secure comes from private sources, GFIs, MDBs, other type of investors. So the question I have is more to EVN. I'm watching to have my eyes on Hanoi. Is EVN interested to offer local currency feed-in tariffs or PPAs for developers to come with local currency solutions? And I think what's interesting is if EVN is offering, let's say, compelling tariffs in dong, developers will turn to two types of lenders: the local banks, and that's a good thing for the Vietnam economy. If developers, they knock on the door of local banks, and then they will ask international financiers to offer local currency solutions, and this is where TCX comes into play. So that's a statement and explanation, but that's also a question to EVN and the Vietnamese government. Is it like in Nepal? Are they willing to structure dong feed-in tariffs to support the growth of their renewable assets?
So we've got a bit of leakage coming from the translation line. Apologies to our listeners. Hopefully the technical team can fix that up. But Jerome, so you would be hedging domestic institutions to be able with their projects. I lost you a little bit in the translation mixing that's coming in.
No, so TCX would hedge. Yeah, TCX is hedging international lenders. Domestic lenders like local banks, they do not need hedging solutions. They can well offer Vietnamese dong financing. They're dealing with other issues than international investors, but the one issue they are not dealing with is FX risk, because they are full of local currency liquidity. So our job, Sean, is to help GFIs, NDBs, and other impact investors finance assets in local currency.
Thank you. Folks, we've got some real problems with the translation line. It's a total mess. So if you're in English, I'm going to suggest when you're listening to Jonathan or Jerome, just switch to the translation off and it'll all be clean. And then when we're hearing from Hui again, you'll have to switch back to the translation being on until such time as we're sure it's working. There's something going on and I'm afraid I don't know what it is. Hui, from your perspective in Vietnam, now tell us, you've heard a little bit from Jonathan about what he's talking about, and you've heard Jerome's view about the nature of role and how this is going to work in Vietnam. Does this make sense to you? Is this useful for you? And more to the point, the people you work with at EVN Finance? Over to you. What's your reaction to what Jonathan and Jerome have said? Okay. Letitia and the production team.
Yes, I'm trying.
Can you confirm to me when the translators got the channel sorted out, please?
She was supposed to change the
just let me know when it's
sorry.
Just let me know when it's fixed, please, Letitia.
Yeah.
And sorry to listeners, this is very unusual. We've got a problem with our translation. So to the translator, please stop until you get the channels worked out. The channels are wrong at the moment. You need to talk to Letitia to get that right. We're hearing two voices at once. It doesn't work. So we're going to stop the translations for a moment until it works. Sorry, folks, we may need to do another session in future to get over the problems we're facing. It's a problem being online, isn't it? I mean, the benefit is, of course, we can come in from all around the world. In fact, I don't even know where Jonathan is, but I know Jerome is in Amsterdam. The downside is we have technical challenges every so often that we have to get over. It's not the same as being in a conference room where everything is organized.
Sau đó chúng tôi đã có cuộc trò chuyện và hiểu nhau về nhau hơn và công việc của nhau nhiều hơn.
Okay, we're going to do consecutive voices now. Vietnamese first and then translation afterwards until such time as this gets fixed, folks. Can I go back to you, please, in Vietnam at EVN Finance? Can you give a reaction from EVN Finance's point of view to what Jerome and Jonathan said? Is this useful? Is this going to make a difference? You're on mute.
Alo. Câu hỏi là về hedging. Anh nói chưa tiên nhỉ? Alo.
Yes. What's your reaction to what Jonathan and Jerome have said, please? Is this useful?
Cái nghiệp vụ tôi xin trao đổi về cái nghiệp vụ hedging thì là hiện tại chúng tôi là hiện tại đang vay các nguồn vốn từ nước ngoài bằng tiền đô và chúng tôi hedging ngay trong thị trường trong nước. Ở trong nước chúng tôi có rất nhiều cái tổ chức tín dụng lớn và sẵn sàng thực hiện những cái nghiệp vụ hedging đó.
And wait one moment. Everyone, English channel is now working. If you're an English channel speaker, please go back to the English channel. I'm sorry, Wei. Go ahead, please. Back to you.
Tuy nhiên chúng tôi cũng rất chào đón nếu mà các ngài có thể là các ông có thể là hedging cho chính các cái sản phẩm đó ngay tại thị trường quốc tế. Tại vì đối với chúng tôi thì là khi mà giải ngân cho khách hàng bằng Việt Nam đồng thì cái việc chúng tôi nhận nguồn vốn bằng Việt Nam đồng và giải ngân cho khách hàng bằng Việt Nam đồng thì chúng tôi có thể giảm được cái công cụ hedging nếu mà các anh sẵn sàng thực hiện những cái nghiệp vụ đó. Còn về cái việc hedging như nào, về các cái chính sách tiền tệ của chính phủ Việt Nam như thế nào thì tôi nghĩ rằng là các anh chị các ông bà thì cũng đã tìm hiểu rất là sâu về những cái chính sách tiền tệ của chính phủ của đất nước Việt Nam của chúng tôi rất nhiều năm vừa qua.
And in terms, what is stopping you in now supporting investment opportunities for overseas investors, long-term debt? What do you need to do more? How am I going to see a 15-year bond from EVN Finance listed on the London Stock Exchange?
Trong cái cuộc chúng tôi trong cái buổi hội thảo ngày hôm nay về những cái cơ hội về kinh doanh, cơ hội về đầu tư vào năng lượng thì một cái điểm rất là quan trọng là để đầu tư thành công hiệu quả chúng ta sẽ phải có nguồn vốn dài hạn. Vì vậy cái điều chúng tôi mong muốn nhất là sau những cái buổi này chúng ta có thể kết nối các cái kênh đầu tư dài hạn từ thị trường nước ngoài để đầu tư dài hạn vào cho các cái dự án năng lượng sạch, năng lượng tái tạo trên cái thị trường Việt Nam. Tại vì như các anh biết đấy, tất cả các cái dự án năng lượng tái tạo đều là phải sử dụng những cái nguồn vốn dài hạn cả, nguồn vốn chung dài hạn cả.
That sounds very straightforward. That sounds very simple. Is it really that simple?
maybe I
Jonathan,
would just
go ahead.
yeah, no, I think maybe I would just add to
Về
what
tất nhiên là để tất nhiên là để đầu tư vào tất cả các cái dự án năng lượng tái tạo, năng lượng điện gió thì cũng giống như chúng tôi hợp tác với các nhà đầu tư trước đây, rất nhiều nhà đầu tư nước ngoài trước đây. Đó là những cái sự hỗ trợ về kỹ thuật. Hỗ trợ về kỹ thuật, chúng tôi nói một cái đơn giản như là một cái environment and society, là về môi trường, về xã hội. Trước đây nhiều năm thì chúng tôi cũng còn nói thực sự là chúng tôi còn chưa có nhiều cái khái niệm về cái môi trường và xã hội như thế nào, nhưng đến khi hợp tác với các cái đơn vị đó thì chúng tôi cảm thấy đấy là một cái chương trình rất là hay, ý nghĩa và nó mang tính chất là bền vững. Vì vậy việc đầu tư những cái chương trình năng lượng điện gió, điện tái tạo, chúng tôi nghĩ rằng cái việc hỗ trợ về kỹ thuật, hỗ trợ về các cái mảng hỗ trợ về kỹ thuật đồng hành cùng với những cái khoản giải ngân đấy sẽ là những cái rất là ý nghĩa và tạo ra một cái sự đầu tư bền vững, đầu tư ổn định và cho tất cả các bên.
Jonathan.
Yeah, I'm just going to echo what Hui has said. I think the importance of partners is really important. And I think I mentioned this, partners like CBI, like Garanco, and I think Garanco is a unique organization, right? And I think we are quite rather bespoke. You know, there are very few organizations in the world that offer the products that we do. I think I would say the same for TCX, but I'll let Jerome speak for himself. But I think we are here to really enable those transactions that don't, you know, in a way naturally happen. I think we are here because there are certain inefficiencies in the market. And I think what I was trying to say, and again now emphasize, is that green is a new layer of, you know, the lens in which we look at our financing, you know, the concerns around the financing gaps we talked about. But I think there are some, you know, I think one of the questions in the Q&A also talked about the greenfield versus brownfield projects. And I think earlier I was trying to talk about the credit, you know, the non-recourse financing. In terms of credit concerns, I think there are still lots of things that we need to unpick, right? And I think green is a new lens, so we want to enable you know, financing to go to the green projects. But I think there are a lot of these things that we still need to unpick. And I think from at least I can speak for Garanco's perspective, our credit guarantee is there to enable that, you know, as I mentioned, to do the landmark transactions, to show the art of the possible. Because I think that is the first step. There is a pathway for the market to reach maturity. And I think we are starting to see some of these pieces being rolled up, you know, with all our good partners. I think that will take time. And I think to your question, Sean, that will take time. And I think we need to sort of lay the building blocks for the market to reach the scale at which you need, right, for the financing to really happen at the level that's needed to plug the gap. But what we were trying to do here is to lay the building block.
Jerome, your thoughts now? Thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah, I think to me it's still that question that I asked to EVN is will the landscape for utility scale change so developers can work on local currency feed-in tariffs or PPAs? I think for now that's not the case. So to me, that remains an open question to EVN and the Vietnamese government. Do they want to create a more conducive framework for developers to finance what will come in the next few months and years, but this time around in local currency? So the utility company EVN is not committing itself to paying dollars, but will commit itself to pay for 15, 20 years Vietnamese dong to buy a megawatt of energy,
which is the critical factor, isn't it? That's the benefit. That's the extraordinary benefit going forward. Yeah, and that makes everything easy, I would have thought, to be able to do this.
Because it's also a comment to the gentleman and the team of EVN Finance is when I see the pace at which megawatts are added every single year, especially in 2019, which is a remarkable year, as you noticed. when the Vietnamese dong is under pressure or starts depreciating, that can be 3 years, 5 years, 10 years time, who knows? What will happen to EVN? I mean, if they have to increase, if mechanically tariffs go up simply because the dong depreciates, what will be the impact on the budget of the national utility and the government? So my strong advice would be that part of that growth is financed to feed in tariffs in local currency as opposed to American dollars.
That makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense. Hui, from your perspective, I'm hoping that makes sense from EVN. Folks, we need to start wrapping up, would you believe? I'm sorry we lost a few minutes of the translation about this, and we're not able to go much further. But we've heard some really critical things from Jonathan about what Guaranco can do and what the challenge is to go forward, but also from Jerome as a critical point. You know, if we get the support so people can do long-term financing in dong with hedging facilities that TCX provide, being a broader enabler of doing that, it's going to make life a lot easier. I think. So we, from EVN Finance's point of view, what are your last thoughts, your last comments to wrap us up on this and about the opportunity? Over to EVN Finance. Hui, are you there? Are you able to dive in? Okay. Hui, over to you.
Khánh dịch
Tức là anh sẽ quan tâm Khánh sẽ dịch trực tiếp cho anh đi luôn. Không đơn giản đâu. Anh tức là anh sau buổi này anh rất là quan tâm những cái sản phẩm của hai đối tác này và sẽ có những buổi cụ thể và những cơ hội rất là tiềm năng để có thể hợp tác với đối tác đấy.
Rất là cảm ơn cái buổi họp ngày hôm nay. Tôi nghĩ sau cái buổi họp ngày hôm nay chúng tôi sẽ có những cái trao đổi cụ thể với các đối tác về những cái nhu cầu, về những cái nhu cầu và mong muốn của những cái đối tác để chúng ta tạo ra những cái sản phẩm, những cái cấu trúc sản phẩm phù hợp theo những cái giữa nhu cầu của các anh chị cũng như là nhu cầu của EVN Finance cũng như là nhu cầu đầu tư ở trên thị trường Việt Nam. Tôi nghĩ rằng là những cái buổi này sẽ rất là bổ ích và sẽ lại mang lại rất nhiều cơ hội để hợp tác lẫn nhau.
Translator.
We would like to thank you for attending this meeting, and we could say that there are so many potential cooperation between the parties, and I want to say that for further discussion on future products, we expect some meeting in the near future, so we can discuss more about the products.
Thank you very much. Jerome, give us a final word here, and do note that someone you've had a couple of emails coming through in the chat from Quang Trung and so on who were working for new developers. I hope some of these contacts will turn into something. Please do note, if you're on the call and you'd like to contact either Jerome or Jonathan to find out more about their services, we want you to. I'm putting Jerome's email in the chat now, and we can connect you with Jonathan as you need be. But Jerome, give us some final thoughts from your perspective, please.
Yeah, so I think if anyone needs VND financing, they can come to TCX. So we will try to make it possible for tenors as long as needed, because we have no tenor limitation. And I have a comment that EVN PPA is already in local currency. They just index to USD. But that's the problem. If they're indexed to USD, it means that every time the dollar appreciates, the cost of financing is going up. So I think the proposal that actually the change we would like to make happen is simple. Is EVN proposed local currency PPAs that are simply not indexed. And for that, so it means that EVN would be fully protected. The DON can depreciate. That wouldn't change anything from the perspective of EVN. And for the developer, that would be the same, because the developer would have secured local currency financing. So asset liability is matched. That's what we want to do. So, but my message right now is I think we need to talk. So I invite all developers to come to me, TCX, so we can discuss financing matters. And at the same time, I make a strong action point on my list to follow up with EVN Finance to understand if what we propose is valuable to them and how we can support that exponential growth of megawatts in the country.
Thank you, Jerome. Jonathan, last word, and don't forget to drop your email into the chat. A last word.
Thanks, Sean, and I think thanks again to CDI and all the panelists for this discussion. I think to the point about Vietnam's development, I think we at Guaranco are very positive about the direction of travel, and I think that there is a lot of potential for renewable energy in the market. I think Jerome alluded to one of the features of the nature of PPAs in the Vietnamese market, and I think there is a lot of I appreciate there's a lot of work that's going on within the Vietnamese ecosystem, right? I think they're talking about the DPPA mechanisms, talking about a bidding model, perhaps. I think guidance is still being rolled out, and I understand some of these were delayed because of COVID-19 impact this year. But I appreciate. I think but I think that there is positive development, and I think at Guaranco we are positive about where the direction of travel. And I think at Guaranco, what I would leave with my last sentence is to say that if there is a slightly challenging transaction for to lay some of these building blocks that I tried to mention, right? Where you need an innovative partner to think of structuring solutions, to really do some of these landmark moves, then Guaranco is the partner to reach out to. And feel free to reach out to us. I think we don't back down from a difficult challenge. I think it's for as long as things do stack up, right, commercially, credit, and across, and importantly on the green aspect. Guaranco is the partner there, and I think we are very excited, about Vietnam's potential and development, and I think I look forward to engaging with all the panelists and also maybe some of the audience here today in coming years. I'm sure there's a lot more we can do together. So with that, I'll end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Jerome. Thank you, Huy in Vietnam, and thank you to our listeners to be part of this. This is being recorded. It will be available in our YouTube channel and via Climate Bonds or YouTube. Search for Climate Bonds Initiative, surprisingly enough, and you'll find it. We look forward to a lot more happening in Vietnam in coming years, and renewable energy rollout and the financing of that, and the integration with international capital markets. The climate bonds, we're committed to finding ways to support the growth of the Vietnamese renewable energy market. And I know Jonathan is, and I know Jerome is as well. Let's see what we can do all together with EVN Finance and other organizations in Vietnam to make this revolution really happen. Thank you everyone for joining us.